we think of wine, we think in two types, red or white. Most of us don't think about the kind of grape that goes into the wine we like to enjoy, much less the process that goes into making it. All we want is to pour it in a glass, close our eyes, swallow, and taste. Heaven. Then there's the history, and North Carolina is where North America's history began.
North Carolina is the forefather of wines in North America. The Native American folks enjoyed muscadine grapes here for thousands of years prior to they were native here to anybody coming to the United States other than them, or to North America.
The first commercial winery in the United States was established in North Carolina's Halifax County by Sidney Weller in 1835. And in 5 years, the vineyard became the leading wine producer in the country. Before the Civil War, North Carolina boasts 25 wineries and a number of vineyards. After the devastation of the Civil War, North Carolina wines became known around the world, winning awards in Louisiana all the way to Paris. Then came Prohibition, and the wine industry crashes.
So that's really a part of our culture back before Prohibition, but after Prohibition it was basically destroyed. There were thousands of acres of grapes, and so many of them only in like 2 and 3 acre tracts, up to 50, 60 acre tracts in Robeson and Columbus and Pender and surrounding counties up until Prohibition.
To present date, things have changed and the wine industry is booming again. In fact, North Carolina has over 100 wineries all over North Carolina focusing on all types of grapes, from our native muscadine grape and even the European-style vinifera grape.
We actually do both muscadines and some of the bunch grapes, or that are crosses between the northern grape varieties of the USA and the European grape varieties that came in from Europe years ago. Some of those crosses are resistant to diseases that makes the actual cross you can use it here, because there's a particular disease called Pierce's disease that many of the European crops can't handle as far as vines is concerned.
There's a lot of vinifera grapes being grown in North Carolina, just 100 miles west of here. But it's just a little bit of difference in the altitude, which affects both the temperature and the humidity. And that's why we grow muscadine here. Muscadines grow here. They're resistant to Pierce's disease because of the fact that they are a Native American grape. They've grown here. They have evolved into a resistant strain of grapes.
So how exactly does wine go from the vine to the bottle? It's called viticulture and enology.
The difference between viticulture and enology is basically that with enology, it's the process of making wines. But viticulture is growing the grapes in the vineyards for the winemaking or the other purposes you might use the grapes for. Maybe even fresh grapes and preserves, jellies, jams, stuff like that.
The majority of our grapes are mechanically harvested. We do contract harvesting. We have someone that comes in here. Usually it is end of September to early in October, last week or two of September to the first week or two in October. And he comes in when we tell him the grapes are ready to be picked, and he harvests them. And then we bring those grapes out of the field back to the back of our winery where our crush pad is, where the grapes are processed, pressed into juice, and then go into our fermentation tank.
Usually the first week in September, you check the bricks on it. You go out and we have an instrument to check the bricks. And when the bricks get normally about 14 to 15 bricks, then you start harvesting. And usually the harvest takes about 6 weeks. It depends on how many people you want to use. We harvest the grapes by hand. We have about 10 to 12 people picking by hand, and we pick usually from 75 to 85, 90 bushels a day. And we take and process them every day. As we pick them, we process them. We put the mortar bisulfate in it every afternoon, and that starts the process. And the process usually lasts about 6-7 weeks.
Most of ours are hand-picked. The grapes we have, we hand-pick them all. And then if we don't have enough grapes to fill our orders that are going out to the grocery stores and to the consumers, we buy grapes from the local growers and just keep right on producing.
Brix is basically the quantity or amount of soluble, fermentable sugars that are in the solution that the yeasts eat to produce ethanol in the wine.
When we start a fermentation process, we want a number that's called 21 Brix. That means we want 21% sugar in our grape juice when we start fermenting. Because if we have 21% sugar in the grape juice, it'll ferment out to about 12% alcohol. And that's the range of alcohol that we want to have in our wine. But Brix is just one of the tests that we do on the juice prior to or as it is going into the tanks.
You can use barrels with muscadine grapes, and some people do. But most wineries now that are producing muscadine grapes are using stainless steel in their primary fermentation and as well as their secondary fermentation. So, but barrel fermentation does cause different flavors to go into your wines, like the oaks, some of the flavors of what might have been in the barrel before, and some people use barrels that were formerly used to make whiskeys and stuff like that in them. If you want that, you can get that added to your muscadines, but most people, like I say, prefer the purity of the muscadine. It's just a totally different grape.
We have stainless steel and we have some food grade plastic barrels.
The ideal temperature is 60 to 65. We try to keep, we have 2 air conditions in the room in the back, and we try to keep it below 60.
Fermenting on the hulls. A lot of your larger wineries are pressing the juice out of the grape, and then later after they ferment, they add a grape extract back to it, which is a natural substance to give it its color, because you lose so much color when you go through the fermenting process.
Doing a tour around here, many times I will ask people, I'll say, what's the difference between red wine and white wine? Well, historically the answer is, one's red, one's white. Well, all grape juice, whether it comes from a black grape, a red grape, a bronze grape, green grape, all grape juice is white. The process by which you make red wine is you do a process called fermenting on the skins. Now, when we harvest the grapes, they go into, the first process is going into a machine called a crusher destemmer. That machine basically takes any of the twigs, the stems out of it, and then crushes the grape. Then that product is then put into a press where we squeeze the juice off. But if we're going to make red wine, we take that product out of the crusher destemmer, and at that point it's called must. We take the must, and instead of putting it in the press, we put that directly into the tank. And the wine is then fermented on the skins. And the enzyme actions of the yeast break down the pigments in the skin, giving it the color that you have typically with a red wine. A rosé wine is simply a matter of how long you leave the wine on the skins. You know, it would stay on just for a day if I was going to make a rosé wine.
The fermentation process has been around for a long time. In fact, it's been going on ever since there's been sugar. Sunshine produces, with the photons striking the leaves of the chloroplasts of the leaves, sugar is produced. And fermentation is basically it's taking yeasts, which are many, many types of yeasts, but yeasts eat sugar. And the byproduct is carbon dioxide and ethanol, alcohol. And that's what the process of fermentation is.
North Carolina's native grape is called the muscadine grape, also known as the Scarbonog. These grapes pack power and health benefits and make some of the sweetest yet bitter wine you've ever tasted.
A health aspect, of all wine is a fairly high concentration of antioxidants.
It lowers cholesterol levels, it lowers blood pressure levels, it relaxes people. And it doesn't take much, 6 to 8 ounces a day is really, that's all, you know, a lot of the doctors recommend.
The resveratrol content in muscadine grapes is 6 to 10 times higher than it is in any other grape. When people talk about, a lot of people have heard the idea that you ought to have a glass of wine a day, it's good for you. Well, if you're going to drink a glass of wine for the health attributes, it should be muscadine, because muscadine wine has a much, much higher antioxidant content than vinifera wines, which are the typical European California grapes.
It's on a smooth and sweet level. We lean more towards the sweeter dessert wines. We do have a couple of semi-sweets, but it's mostly sweet and dessert wines.
Might be even more related to aroma, because when you smell the sweet, aromatic spiciness of the muscadine grape while it's on the vine, you can pick that up in the finished wine before you taste it. So when you smell it and you get that in your nose, that aroma in your nose, then you taste it and roll it around on your tongue. You can smell and taste like a sweet, aromatic, some people say musky, but I can't call it musky flavor. It's just a really delectable, like a candy flavor, different candy flavors, and than some of the dry wines. Most muscadines are made sweet or semi-sweet. Even the commercial wineries, you hardly ever see a dry muscadine because they're more conducive to being sweet. So let's say they're more for desserts. It seems on my palate, they do better for dessert wines or aperitifs, after dinner wines, instead of before dinner and with dinner wine.
In Robeson County, grapes are not the only fruit being used to make wine. Here, they experiment on everything from blackberries to pomegranate.
We concentrate on mostly fruit wines, something a little bit different in the industry. There's a lot of muscadine and grape wines in the industry, but we try to concentrate more on the fruits, but we do have some grape wines. We do an apple, a blackberry, a blueberry, a peach, a pomegranate. We do a strawberry, a watermelon, and then we have our muscadine lines in the Scuppernong and the Tobacco Road Red. Our apple and our Scuppernong go good with a fish or a chicken. And then your red wines like your pomegranate goes good with a turkey or a ham. And then your blackberry and all that, they do good with a beef.
We make two types of the muscadine wine. We make a red. We make it out of Noble. It's some people refer to as a purple grape or a red grape. It's a native grape. Then we have a white grape, which is Carlos. We make the white grape out of. We make 4 different levels of sweetness from each red and each white. We make a dry, we make a semi-dry, we make a semi-sweet, we make a sweet. Then we make some fruit wine. We make a blueberry wine, we make a blackberry wine, we make a peach wine, we make a strawberry wine.
We make 14 different wines here. They go from very sweet wine to very dry wine, and 14 steps in between. So we have 4 different kinds of grapes that we make wine from. We make 14 varieties of wine out of those 4 different varieties, different blends, different sweetenings. So the best way to determine what kind of wine you like is to not go to a grocery store and just buy one and say, this is muscadine wine. You should come to a good winery. Quite frankly, this is a good time to say that we compete every year in the North Carolina State Fair commercial wine competition. Cypress Bend Vineyards has won the Muscadine Cup for the best muscadine wine 3 out of the last 4 years.
Today, North Carolina ranks 9th in the United States wine production and is making a $1.28 billion economic impact with nearly 7,600 jobs covering over 1,800 acres across the state. North Carolina's wine industry is heading in the right direction, and there's a lot of wine for you to taste the South.